Hi guys, let's go watching. Just before that, subscribe and enjoy yourself. Tools from the shelves of the workshop flew to the floor when the owner decided to close her business. His favorite toys, teddy bears, beautifully made furniture, were now in chaos, not carefully arranged in their places. The jars and bottles of oils, varnishes, and other liquids that had once been arranged in their own order were now flying rapidly and uncontrollably to the floor. Another bottle smashed on the floor in the workshop for the production of children's toys with the highest sales in the empire. The main character was holding a large canister from which a golden liquid poured out, enveloping everything it touched. Gasoline-filled barrels and toolboxes, and golden puddles on the floor glistened under the dim light of the moon. When she finished pouring flammable liquid all over the room, the protagonist picked up a match and set it on fire. The match, enveloped in flames, flew swiftly to the floor, where a shiny liquid was already waiting for it. The third-generation workshop, which the heroine ran with her unfortunately deceased father, was now enveloped in the embrace of flames that were destroying the building. The protagonist was looking at how well her wonderful workshop spoke. She wanted to give children dreams and hope, but she set fire to the place where she could create them. Watching her family's history play out before her very eyes, the girl's lips break into a smile. The main character leaned down and covered her face with her hand, and her smile turned into hysterical laughter. Her pupils narrowed and her eyebrows furrowed. The heroine screamed, thinking that no one could see or hear her, and that her life would finally start from scratch. However, the girl's scream woke up all the creatures around her, including humans, and someone's voice shouted back to her to go back to sleep. With a sense of new beginnings and sincere happiness, she walked home. Now she won't have to reopen her workshop. It was an incredibly happy journey home. In her mind, she kept telling her father that the workshop that gave children dreams and hope was no longer there. Finally, the heroine could open the door of her dear, beloved home with peace of mind. The main character is eager to open a bottle of wine that she has been saving so diligently. She decided to celebrate the closing of the workshop with a lavish dinner, with delicious food and alcohol. Raising her arms in victory, she rejoiced that she was finally free from constant threats and sleepless nights. After all, the heroine we already know, named Tria, who also had no surname, suffered from eternal overtime and strange clients. For example, one day the heroine had a client who was going to pay a huge amount of coins for the girl to create a toy the size of a real castle in just 1 week, and if she refused, he was going to kill her. On another occasion, Tria witnessed violence. She was approached by a girl who had run away from home because her father wanted to hurt her. When asked if she had reported her father, the fugitive thought that Tria's father had also tried to harm his daughter. Another example was the abuse of power. One novelist decided to give Tria a diamond, as if only out of kindness. However, when the protagonist asked if she was really being given a diamond for nothing, the author said that in return, Tria had to fulfill one request. So, as the girl thought, they just wanted to force her to perform a task. No wonder her ancestors told her not to believe such things. But now everything is fine, and Tria is happily drinking wine from a glass. The workshop burned down and she can't do anything about it. The heroine thought that she should go to another country. Tria thought maybe she should write a farewell letter in the community. She got a blue ball that allowed her to contact others. The ball in the hands of the main character shone brightly and showed the girl small transparent windows to search for something. So Tria started looking for an anonymous community of traders and tried to connect with them. The heroine printed a letter in which she addressed other traders, saying that she was an anonymous person who closed her business because of orders that she could no longer fulfill. And today he finally burned down his studio. The anonymous person received permission from traders in the area, so he encouraged others in the community to quit their businesses and live happily ever after. Finally, I said goodbye to everyone. So the shipment was successfully completed, and ironically, thanks to the closure of his business, Tria is in a very good mood. After all, those were such hard, long days, but now she won't be doing it anymore. However, she still apologized to her father for being such a disrespectful daughter. Starting tomorrow, Tria's life will change completely. That's how it was supposed to be, but the next morning something happened that the main character did not expect. In just one night, a new, luxurious, and large building stood on the site of the old workshop. A new workshop. Someone's voice announced to the people that His Majesty had personally issued an order to restore the impoverished settlements. When the voice said that they were looking at a new workshop, built on the site of the one that had burned down, Tria remembered a familiar voice and turned to the sound of it. It was Count Aris, who looked at the girl with derision and asked if she had any problems, calling her a citizen. The girl could only look at him with complete shock and bewilderment, because this was a problem of global proportions for her. In her dreams, Tria begged for the closure of this unwanted workshop, which was once again restored. The empire, which was called the Obelisk, had two cities that everyone called its capitals. Paul is the city where the capital was moved 35 years ago, and where all the money and people ended up, as well as Kalia, a city that has become a landmark for everyone today. Just 35 years ago, it was a typical day for all the locals on the streets of Kalia. On this street, there was only the main character's children's toy workshop and an elderly man's smithy. It was a seemingly calm and ordinary day for all citizens on the streets of the ancient city of Kalia. The streets were quiet, with people living their lives, going about their business, and maybe even hurrying somewhere. In the workshop, the main character was also working at her own pace, talking to one of her clients. This client asked for the price of a toy of his choice, which was a small lilac bear. Tria thought for a moment. She had heard that the trader was supposed to come today, so if she wanted to cover the debt, she would have to get more money. However, the protagonist quickly rejected this idea, because even if she asked for more, it would still not cover the debt, so she would take the payment as usual. Tria was about to say something else, but she heard sounds coming from somewhere near the entrance to the studio. She thought it might be the same vendor, but he seemed to say that he would come either in the evening or the next morning. In any case, Tria hurried to the door. However, even before she reached the door, the heroine noticed something strange in the trader's behavior, and she became wary. She stopped in her tracks and listened to the sounds outside when she realized it was definitely not a trader. After all, she had known this man for a long time. He always complained that it was hard for him to carry something and made Tria hold a box or something else for him. The trader usually made no noise. The protagonist wonders if she should pretend that there is no one in the studio, but suddenly everything is quiet outside the door. Tria panicked when she heard an unknown person enter the studio, and it seems that she forgot to lock the door. An unknown voice at the door said that he had an order, and hearing this, the heroine thought it was a bit suspicious. Tria decided that if the stranger outside the door attacked, she would take a gun. So, a second later, she opened the door with a fake smile. Behind the door was a man who might have been hiding his appearance with a long blue cloak behind a luxurious crystal jewelry. He was a man with long, deep blue hair. His face was adorned with sharp, bright purple eyes, and he seemed to be worried about something. She apologized for the delay and asked what kind of order this customer had. She couldn't help but notice that the person in front of her was very gorgeous. However, the man ignored her words and began to approach the protagonist, which scared her a little. Even when Tria repeated her question, she did not receive an answer, but suddenly the stranger's behavior changed to a little strange. The man began to cough, his breathing became intermittent, and his coughing became more intense. The stranger staggered and fell to the ground with an uncontrollable cough, accompanied by bleeding, which Tria noticed. The master ran up to the man in concern and asked him if he was okay. And he wanted to say something, but the girl interrupted him, asking if he should call a doctor. The stranger suddenly stretched out his hand to the girl, and she was frightened and moved away from him a short distance. Through a cough in a rather shaky voice, the man assured me that he was fine and did not need a doctor. Despite his cough, which did not stop, he tried to say a word, but almost nothing came out. Instead, the protagonist tried to force her husband to go to the hospital instead of waiting, but he wanted to say that he had to do something today. But he couldn't. The stranger suddenly fell to the floor, exhausted, right in front of the master, who froze in place, not knowing what to do. Panic gripped her head. Why did this man suddenly faint without finishing his sentence? The protagonist looked at the man under her feet in confusion. Not a single word came out of her mouth, and her body did not know what to do. The stranger was lying on the floor unconscious and without any signs of being awake, but at least his coughing had stopped. The girl stood in front of the powerless body of a stranger, not knowing what to do with the person she had literally just met. She was even more frightened when she realized that anyone who saw her would think that she had killed the man. Tria assessed the unconscious man's appearance and noticed that there seemed to be no external injuries, which was good. Suddenly, the girl felt something familiar. She leaned over to the unconscious stranger and reached out to him. The smell she smelled was very familiar to her, as if she knew exactly what it was. The main character was sure that the man had been poisoned. There could be no mistake. The craftswoman got up from the floor and thought it was very strange, because this poison was made from rare ingredients that people had never even heard of. Suddenly, after thinking carefully, the main character suggested that it could be a wizard. She shouted the name Shady so that it could be heard clearly, and immediately a black shadow crept across the workshop floor. Dark as the deepest night, a shadow, more like a liquid, crawled out of its hiding place and flashed red eyes. When this strange creature appeared behind the artist, she, or rather he, suddenly turned into a human being. Tria apologized for waking the creature from its sleep and asked if Shady, who had previously been known to her, could help her. The protagonist turned her hand slightly and pointed to the unconscious stranger behind her and asked him to swallow all the poison in his body. Shady, a man with equally long but black as the abyss, hair and sparkling red eyes, looked at the unconscious man. The man on the floor, even through his sleep, noticed the intrusive gaze that seemed to see through him. Shady turned to the craftswoman and asked if she knew the man. Tria explained that the person lying on the floor was probably just a customer. The master's friend asked if he did what he was asked. Would Tria be happy? The girl replied that it would be much worse if she just left him here in this condition. Others might think that the artist had somehow harmed this man. Then Shady agreed and decided to help the main character. He stretched out his hand to the unconscious man, from which a black shadow began to flow a second later. A black, thick shadow enveloped the unconscious man's body and absorbed all the poison he contained. The craftswoman thanked her friend, and she was relieved to see that the unconscious man's complexion was becoming more normal. Shady is a shadow. It can absorb anything. It has the ability to do so. Therefore, the poison in the human body cannot affect him in any way, because Shady is not human. This creature was born out of the main character's shadow. In fact, Tria doesn't know his true identity, but Shady is good at expressing his emotions and feelings. The protagonist's friend sleeps in her shadow, but when she calls him, he takes shape. And when Shady gets tired, she moves into a doll that Tria first made when she was a child. Shady falls asleep quite quickly, and having moved into the doll, he slept soundly, and then after a while he woke up with renewed vigor. The protagonist decided to check on her hitherto unfamiliar guest, and noticed that her shadow had woken up and thought that everything was not so bad. Shady comfortably perched on the heroine's shoulder, and she thought she was wasting her time, because she had so little of it. Suddenly, I heard someone's voice calling the owner of the workshop, saying that he had quit early, so he came. Tria remembered that it must have been the merchant who had promised to come today. The protagonist was frightened and panicked, because if she opened the door now, she might actually be reported and sent to prison. In a panic, the artist decided that she should first hide the stranger somewhere. Together with her friend, in the body of a doll, Tria tried to drag the unconscious man away to hide him, but it was admittedly very difficult. Tria couldn't help but notice that the fabric of the cloak she was pulling the stranger by was very exquisite and expensive, but if it got damaged, the owner of the cloak would have to forgive her because she had saved him. Suddenly, the merchant started knocking on the door much louder. The master did not understand why everything was going wrong that day. The protagonist was genuinely worried about the door, which the trader was knocking on with a block of wood, so she left the stranger on the floor and hurried to the new guest. The trader kept knocking on the door with a block of wood, as if he was going to break it. The man shouted at the craftswoman, "Why is it taking so long?" Finally, the heroine opened the door and pushed the man's hand, in which he was holding the bar, to his face, and shouted at him to stop knocking, or he would really break the door. Tria asked why the salesman came so early, and he said he just wanted to give the master some good news. The merchant took out a bag of gold from his bag and handed it to the protagonist. It seems that he has sold all his goods and that the craftswoman will get a good share. A series of soft toys called The First Imperial Family, created by the Tria, was sold at auction, and a very large sum of money was given for it. However, looking at the bag of gold, which still did not have enough money to cover the debt, Tria changed her face and became sad. The girl muttered quietly to herself, wishing she could earn thousands of coins. The merchant asked if it was for a debt and how much she had left to cover it. Tria said that last month she could not cover part of the debt, so now she has 39.2 billion coins left. Tria thought she should have gone to the capital. The merchant only replied that there had never been anyone who didn't know about toys from Gray's workshop before. The artist put on a fake smile and tried to joke that maybe it was time to disappear from the pages of history. It is unlikely that Tria can do anything about it, because her debt, or rather her father's debt, was too huge. The trader tried to offer the girl to sell popular products, such as the first vassal or illusionary creature. Thanks to them, they could make a lot of money. But Tria said she didn't have the energy to do it all. Finally, after talking to the merchant, the craftswoman walked out the door and closed it, and the girl was able to breathe a sigh of relief. Listening to the sounds, the protagonist noticed that the workshop was quite quiet. Was the stranger still unconscious? Shidi seemed to take good care of the man, but his condition did not improve. The craftswoman went into the room where she had left the stranger earlier and asked Shady if he would be okay if he continued to stay in the doll. As she thought, Shady must have been very tired when she returned. She also noticed a man lying in a rather strange position. The protagonist reached for a doll lying on the floor in which her shadow was hiding. The master warmly and caringly hugged Shady and thanked him for his concern. As it turned out, he was really worried. Tria noticed that the stranger hadn't woken up, so she put him in a more comfortable position and let him sleep on. She is very sleepy herself, because she was up all night. The heroine decided to wait a little longer. Maybe this man would wake up sooner or later. However, it was already quite late. She waited until nightfall, and her husband did not wake up. The girl waited and waited, did not go to bed herself, and kept waiting for her guest to wake up. But this never happened. The protagonist had done everything she could during this time. She had even managed to read the book, but this stranger still wouldn't wake up and snored as if he was mocking his companion. Irritated and angry, the master decided that she would also sleep, because Shady was here. Time moved on, and it began to dawn on the street of Kalia. The sun was coming out from behind the horizon, enveloping the buildings with its rays. The master was sleeping peacefully in her bed, and next to her was Shady in the form of a doll. Tria was not disturbed by anything and was having good dreams. Suddenly, a shadow or silhouette loomed over her, but the protagonist did not notice it yet. But when she heard someone's voice above her asking if she was waking up, Tria suddenly opened her eyes and noticed a silhouette above her. The girl got out of bed and saw a stranger who had been sleeping on the floor only a short time ago and now stood looking at her. It seems that the heroine had not yet fully woken up and did not realize what was happening. She looked at her guest in confusion. Looking at the appearance of the stranger in front of her, the artist for a second even forgot what she wanted to say. However, without even thanking her, the hero said irritably that he remembered for sure that the girl had hugged him, but she hadn't hugged him. She had only lifted him and moved him. The girl tried to politely explain that there had been a misunderstanding because it was the man who had suddenly lost consciousness. In fact, she wanted to send her husband to the hospital. Because of this, she almost became a stranger's murderer. The stranger said that he must have taken the poison, but now he doesn't feel it at all. Did the girl do something to his body? The girl tried to assure him that she knew nothing, because she had just left her husband and he was better, but no one would believe that. However, it seems that the man did not notice anything suspicious, but instead smugly admitted that he knew his wonderful body well, which, in his opinion, had cleansed itself. The master was surprised to find out how narcissistic this man was, even if he practiced magic. If Tria had left everything as it was, the stranger would never have woken up. And the stranger kept going, saying that if his unsurpassed and beautiful body was in danger, it would take action, just like he was. And the girl just agreed, even though she didn't like it. The girl suggested that he leave if he felt much better, but the man said that he had come here to get an order. Tria wondered why the wizard came to her studio and not to the hospital. The craftswoman thought she had misunderstood something, but the wizard actually wanted to create a magic weapon. So she replied that if the man was looking for a smithy, he had come to the wrong place. After all, this is a children's toy workshop, and the smithy is a little further away. However, the stranger turned away from the girl, and she wondered why he was pretending not to hear or understand her. What was he doing? The wizard did not pay attention to the girl, did not even listen to her, and his hand, dressed in a light blue glove, stretched out in space. Suddenly, rounded symbols appeared in front of the wizard, shining bright blue with an admixture of white sparks. Of course, the master thought that this man was a magician, but she was still surprised when she actually saw his magic. It seems that the symbols created by the wizard were a portal or perhaps a repository in which he was looking for something and finally found it. He took out a small box made in red with golden decorations. The wizard said that he wanted Tria to create something for the child from what was inside the box. The main character asked again, "Does she have to create something for the child?" The wizard asked if this was a problem. However, the heroine said that if it was an order for a toy, she would certainly accept it. The girl was surprised to receive a personal order because she hadn't had one for a long time. Tria asked the client to wait outside, and she would wash up and come back. The wizard agreed but told her to hurry up because he was very busy. After a while, the two were already solving the problem with the ordering documents. Tria said that even if it's a personal order, the client has to sign a contract. The client asked if it was really trivia tea that the main character had brought him a little earlier. Instead, she confirmed it and said that if her husband didn't like it, she could just bring him some hot water. Trivia tea was known to be effective in removing poisons and toxins, so the heroine thought that this tea would be useful for a person who had been poisoned. However, the stranger replied coldly without emotion that he liked all teas, so everything was fine. Then, if everything was fine, the craftswoman suggested moving on to the key point. She asked the age of the child for whom the order was to be made. She thought that her husband was angry at this question. The irritated wizard asked if the girl was talking about his age. She replied that she was asking about his age to make it easier to understand his child's tastes. The man called his child a not-so-nice word, which angered the craftswoman. She was once again convinced that this man was very narcissistic when he thought that the girl wanted to know his age. The girl thought that this stranger had a lot of money, but no common sense. But why did he never tell her the age of his child? When the craftswoman asked him about it again, the man simply shrugged his shoulders and replied that it didn't matter how old his child was. He replied that his child is now about 1, maybe 2, or even 3 years old. Tria turned away in annoyance, trying not to show her anger. The protagonist knows such parents all too well, because such people are not interested in their children at all. The girl asked if she could at least find out the child's name, and the wizard, instead of answering, fell silent again, as if he didn't know that too. Tria wondered how such a person could be a father. After a few minutes of silence, the stranger finally uttered some letters, and the master turned her attention to him. The wizard said the name Eliza, and his face lit up. A joyful smile appeared on his lips, and his cheeks flushed. The protagonist was surprised and asked why this stranger had called the child's name so joyfully and tenderly. This magician pronounced Eliza as if he said it a few more times, the name would dissolve. This man's voice was so gentle. The master thought that this man did not seem to be a father who was as good as she thought he was. Then she asked me what sex the child was. The wizard replied that Eliza was a girl, and the main character was memorizing all this information as they continued to talk. After a while, Tria finally admitted that she had misunderstood the man. He is definitely not one of those parents who only seem to be good. The girl sincerely wondered how this stranger could not know her child's preferences. This stranger does not even know the basic things like color, food, or his favorite toy. Tria thought it would be much better if a person who really cared about her child came. However, the fact that an ordinary person who was poisoned came to the workshop and not to the hospital is not similar to a real father. The master sighed and said that now there would be personal questions, and if the man did not know the answer, he could say so. The main character asked why the wizard wanted to give such a gift to his daughter. The man was surprised by this question and looked at the master in confusion and perhaps thought about the answer. However, his answer was no different from the previous ones. He said that he did not know and why he had come to the workshop in the first place. The protagonist was confused and looked at the interviewer with a bunch of questions. She did not understand his answers. The wizard replied that he had come because his servant had offered to give the child a gift, but now he thought it was all nonsense. His child doesn't care about the gift that his father will give him, who doesn't even know the answers to such ordinary questions. Before the man could finish speaking, the craftswoman interrupted him and contradicted the wizard's words. The main character said that there are no children in the world who do not like attention from their parents. Tria asked if this gentleman had never given such gifts before. If the wizard calls his child by name, smiles at her, and hugs her, his daughter will immediately become much happier. The master assured me that Eliza would definitely be happy about it, and that she and this magician could even make a bet. The client and the artist discussed the details of the order until the evening and seemed to finish only when the sun began to set over the horizon. Finally, Tria asked if she could really choose what the gift would look like. He replied that he knew better, since he knew the children's wishes. The protagonist was embarrassed and clenched her fists as if it was a difficult topic for her, but she tried not to show it. Tria agreed and said that she knew this because everyone was a child once. Everyone had something they wanted so badly. Even if not all children got what they wanted and could do nothing about it. Suddenly, the craftswoman remembered the box that the wizard had given her and asked her to make something out of what was in it. The girl wondered if the box contained fabric, or maybe other materials, or glue. Out of curiosity, the craftswoman reached for the box and opened it. The main character expected to see something for a toy, but what was in the box did not please her at all, and she quickly closed it. The gentleman in the blue cloak asked if she was okay, or if she had any problems, and the girl shouted that there were precious stones in the box. It is unlikely that you will be able to make a toy out of them, so there are several reasons why you shouldn't or even can't use jewelry in the creation of toys. The first reason was that gemstones, compared to other materials, are much more fragile and can be easily broken if force is applied. Also, because the jewels shine brightly, children can easily confuse them with sweets. Of course, there are other reasons, but these are definitely enough. The wizard was irritated and asked, "Is it really that hard? Is the wizard saying that his daughter won't be able to receive such a gift?" The girl tensed up and thought that the person in front of her was very frivolous. The stranger got even more angry and asked again, "Is it really so hard to give such a gift?" She was frightened and shaken when she heard the man's words and saw his irritated expression. The protagonist quickly replied that it was not that difficult, but that gemstones were an unusual material with which she had never worked. Tria wanted to say something else, but the man interrupted her and named the amount of 10 million coins. The wizard said that he would pay her so much money for her work that it would cover all the murders. Can a craftswoman who has never worked with such materials refuse such an offer? However, she thought, if you look at all these jewels again, you can see that they are quite strong and large, so everything must be fine, right? Suddenly, the stranger added that if he liked the final product, he would double the payment. The girl replied that she thought she could handle it. The main character thought that with 20 million coins, she could definitely cover her debt. However, she was pulled out of her reverie by her husband, who said he would return in a week. Finally, the craftswoman asked if she could make some toys. The stranger was about to leave and replied that 2 toys would be enough, and the craftswoman could decide for herself. The wizard snapped his fingers and said that if the girl made toys of poor quality, she should be prepared for the consequences. After the man snapped his fingers, symbols appeared under his feet, shining brightly with white and blue light. After that, the wizard turned to the protagonist and said that he would come back with his daughter Eliza in exactly 1 week. The wizard left a pile of papers floating in the air in complete chaos. When the strange stranger left, Tria asked if the wizard could not create the toy himself with his own magic, if he was so powerful. Suddenly, the artist thought about her own question and came to a strange, perhaps true, conclusion. Tria wondered if the wizard had asked the girl to make a much better toy than the one that could be created by magic. So in a moment, the wizard, having passed through his magic portal, probably found himself in his house, which looked incredibly luxurious and bright. The wizard thought about it. He thought that he had met a rather strange girl who was not at all afraid of him, and even dared to put him on the floor when he was unconscious. Behind him, someone approached the man and addressed the owner of the tower, who was most likely the wizard, asking if his walk had gone well. The owner looked around and said that it was quite an interesting walk for him. This wizard was a young master of the wizard tower. His name was Cayenne. The man who came to meet his master said that the wizard came much later than he expected, Was the young master really that curious? The wizard replied that it was very interesting because they put poison in his food. The wizard's assistant was surprised and noticed that the poison didn't seem to work on his master, but he apologized anyway and said that he would neutralize the poison right away. However, the magician replied that it was not necessary because his body had already done everything. But he also added that it is worth finding out who put the poison in. A person who was born with enormous strength is slowly destroying his body. Therefore, the day was set when the wizard's endless mana was briefly sealed. This day falls on the 15th day of the month, the day when the wizard is powerless because his mana is sealed. So that was the day the young owner of the tower had yesterday, but even so, he insisted on taking a walk. The wizard's assistant asked why his master had gone outside instead of staying in his tower. However, the man replied that it would be too late, but he did not say why. The assistant asked why it would be too late, and the wizard replied that if he hadn't done it yesterday, everything would have gone off schedule, and that would have been unacceptable. Even so, the assistant didn't understand what schedule his boss was talking about, and then finally remembered, because Miss Eliza's birthday was coming up. However, even because of this urgency, Mr. Wizard should have stayed in his tower when he felt sick, but he did not. The wizard asked if it would have gone this far if his assistant had known about it right away. The man asked his servant how he even knew about the workshop where the wizard used to work, even if the assistant had no children. The servant realized that his master did go to the workshop, but he did not know that his servant was a big fan of Miss Tria, the owner of the place. The assistant spent all his savings on a series of toys called the First Imperial Family. After that, every day he played a brave hero with the bears. However, the servant replied that he had just been in town and noticed the workshop and thought it was good. The wizard quickly changed the subject and asked where his daughter was. He received a reply that Eliza was in her room as usual. The wizard realized that his daughter, as usual, was upstairs on another floor of the tower, so he decided to go to her. He also recalled that the master advised him to call his daughter by her first name more often. The man came into the room and immediately called Eliza's name, and the girl was sitting on the windowsill when the window from her room was open. Eliza, hearing her father's voice, looked back at him with her bright pink eyes flashing, her lush short hair blowing in the breeze, the same color as her eyes. The girl was dressed in a luxurious little dress made in pink colors. The girl was silent for a few seconds, and then when she finally wanted to say something, she abruptly stopped talking. Mr. Wizard grabbed the girl by her dress and pulled her away from the open window, and she screamed back. The girl's father asked why she was sitting there, as it was dangerous. The man pulled the girl to him and hugged her lightly, holding her daughter in his arms. Eliza was seriously frightened and trembled at the mere sight of her father. The wizard remembered the words of the wizard who told him to call his daughter by her name more often, to smile and hug her, and she would become much happier. So he tried to call his daughter by name, but immediately fell silent. The girl who was sitting in her father's arms was quiet, and her small, childlike hand trembled. As soon as the girl's father repeated her name again, Eliza's little cheeks turned red, and she immediately turned her attention to her father. The magician realized that when he called his daughter by name, she immediately answered him. The man put his little girl on a shelf nearby and said that he had ordered a toy for her. Eliza's father went on to say that he had entrusted the job to the most talented craftsman. Mr. Wizard asked if Eliza had any free time next week. The girl was a little surprised, so she didn't immediately find the words to answer, but she agreed anyway. According to the text, the girl was 4 years old. When the wizard heard yes, he was overjoyed. He thought that Tria had said to call his daughter by name, hug her, and give her a gift, so he could only smile. However, Mr. Wizard was not very good at smiling in public. It looked rather creepy. He smiled terribly and said that Eliza would have to go with him to a place. Seeing this sight, the girl was very frightened and froze in place, and her father said that Eliza would definitely like what he had prepared for her, because she was his daughter. The girl trembled and cried sharply and desperately when she saw such a terrible smile and rather threatening words for a child. Eliza pulled away from her father and began to apologize many, many times, and cry. Cayenne shouted that there was an open window behind the girl and she might fall, but she started crying even more. The magician himself was panicking terribly, but he tried to smile and ask the girl to stop crying. Instead, she tried to hold back her tears, which was even worse. You can lose your mind like that, Kayan thought. At that time, Tria thought about what she should do with the jewelry she had been entrusted with. All the while, she was cleaning up documents from the floor that had scattered everywhere, thanks to Kayan's magic. The night passed and the sun came out again from behind the horizon and enveloped the city in its rays. After Kayan left, the studio was finally clean and orderly. The protagonist, who had spent the whole night cleaning her studio, was finally able to rest. She sat down on the stairs that led to another floor of her studio and breathed a sigh of relief when she finished her work. Tria asked Shady's opinion because she has to go to that forest to get materials for her work, namely metal and wood. Shady agreed and was putting the book in order. The Forbidden Forest is a place where special trees grow and unique minerals are found. This forest is as unique as it is dangerous, which is why it got its name. However, after the protagonist met Shady, she was never in danger again. The master grabbed the doll in which Shady was hiding. The girl was in a slight panic, because if she went to that forest, it would take at least 3 days. Her knife cutter was already too old, so Tria threw it away. So we also need platinum. The protagonist thought that she was unlikely to get everything done in 1 week, so maybe she should ask the client for 3 more days. She called Shady and told her that they should leave right now. Before she could finish her sentence, however, Shady transformed into his human form and gently embraced his mistress. The craftswoman noticed his shadow and told him that he had just recently transformed into a human. Wasn't he tired? Shady instead just smiled warmly at the girl and asked her not to let go of his hand. Tria trusted the creature, so she easily took his hand, but was surprised why she was asked to do so. Shady squeezed the protagonist's hand firmly but gently in a more comfortable position, and a shadow suddenly began to circle around them both. In just a moment, all 3 of them, including the doll, found themselves in the same forest, surrounded by green plants and bright flowers. The protagonist quickly moved away from Shady and let go of his hand, and her cheeks blushed embarrassingly, but she thanked him anyway. The master thought that Shady could pass for a girl because he is not human, but every day he treats Tria as if she were an important lady. When Tria was on her way to find the materials, she looked back and noticed that Shady wasn't following her, so she said that he was in a hurry. A few days later, when they both returned from the Forbidden Forest, Tria worked diligently on the toys, and Shady helped her with all his might. Finally, after a very long time, the craftswoman finished making the toy she had been working on day and night. This toy was a pacifier, light and white. Everything was perfect as long as it had gems on it. Platinum and rubber extracted from the slime that was just in that forest. This is a completely different level. Isn't Tria a genius? Well, she really liked her job. Suddenly, the craftswoman noticed Shady, who was in the body of a doll and spinning around the girl holding something in his little hands. Did he bring the jewelry too? However, the white diamonds that Shady brought will not be visible on the same white nipple base, unfortunately. It seems that Shady was a little angry, and the main character thought that she had hurt his ego with her words. So while Shady was helping the master, she decided to do another thing she had planned. It was dark night again. Beautiful stars appeared in the sky, and the city plunged into nighttime peace and quiet. Despite the recent pile of work, the studio was very quiet and rather dark. Exhausted by her work, the main character was lying exhausted, not even in bed, but on a small, not very comfortable sofa. Honestly, and without exaggeration or vice versa, Tria was tired and exhausted that day. As she thought, making toys using an oven was too difficult. However, despite this, Tria managed to do it, and she was able to do it in the time allotted for the job. The protagonist, who was previously lying on her stomach, rolled over and noticed something interesting. This was the case with Shady, who finally chose the gemstones for the jewelry, even though it took him several hours. Trisha noticed that they were 2 very beautiful rubies that would go well with the toy. Dachina asked Sheeta to help her, to give her a toy and jewelry, and to share her shadow with the artist. With her eyes closed, the artist sat on the same sofa, her hands joined so that her palms wrapped around the toy, and a dark shadow was rushing from within. After a while, the main character opened her eyes and seemed to have finished her work and looked at her. With the help of his shadow, Shady can earn anything he wants. Sounds of joy. The artist embedded them in the object, just with the help of a shadow shared with her by a friend. So, Tria, together with Shady, created a toy in which they put all the best things into it, making it much more expensive than all those gems. What they created was beautiful. And now they were both going to have a good night's sleep on the couch, because Tria didn't have the strength to even make it to the bed. In the morning, the heroine was still sleeping in a rather extraordinary position, not waking up even when there was a knock on her studio door. Suddenly, because of the dangerous position in which the artist was sleeping, she fell off the couch and onto the floor. The main character covered her eyes from the bright sun and asked in a hoarse voice why she was sleeping on the floor. Tria thought that she seemed to be working very hard on something. Rising from the floor, the girl asked who was knocking on her door. She wondered why everyone wanted to break down her studio door so badly. When she opened the door, the sunlight blinded Tria's eyes, and she replied that she hadn't opened her studio yet. Tria saw a man in front of her whom she thought she'd seen before, but realized it only a second after Cayenne said the deadline had come to an end. The artist realized that it was Eliza's father, but he was wearing different clothes, so she didn't recognize him right away. The protagonist was still sleepy after working for so many days, so she fell asleep even when she was talking. When the master almost fell to the ground from drowsiness, she noticed a little girl hiding behind Cayenne's back. Tria quickly straightened up and smiled awkwardly, because it would not be a good idea to behave like that when she first met Eliza. Even though it was so early, the heroine still agreed to receive clients. However, when Tria noticed something strange in the little girl's behavior, she took notice and looked closely at her. The girl clutched the fabric of her father's clothes in her small hands and looked at the craftswoman with frightened eyes, trembling very much. The protagonist thought about it and decided that it was probably not her that the girl was afraid of. Eliza looked at her father and pulled away from him, and he looked at her with a very ominous look. When the little girl saw her father's gaze, she froze in place and trembled even more, her eyes filling with tears. Tria was surprised to see this scene and looked at Cayenne with condemnation in her eyes. Was what she saw domestic violence? The girl was trembling and almost crying as she looked at her father and pulled her little white-gloved hands back to her. Cayenne's murderous and terrifying gaze consumed his little girl, making her even more afraid. Thinking that it could be domestic violence, Tria began to worry, and long-forgotten stories began to appear in her head. Suddenly, the main character interrupted this tense moment, apologized, and drew the attention of the people in front of her to herself. Of course, she is very tired, but she cannot ignore what could be domestic violence. The girl stood in front of Eliza, hiding her behind her, and said that their Eliza, as Tria called the girl, seemed to be a little worried. The heroine took the girl's little hand in hers and offered to take a walk with Eliza, and at the same time present her with a toy. She also added that if she stayed alone with little Eliza for a while, she would be able to better understand her preferences. The wizard grimaced even more and frightened even the master with his gaze. He didn't like the way the main character called the girl their Eliza. The protagonist was alarmed and nervously replied that she didn't mean it and quickly corrected herself by saying his Eliza. Tria thought that this person knew nothing about public life. That was the answer. The girl was holding Eliza's small hand in hers, and Cayenne looked at it and thought. The protagonist wanted to say something or ask the wizard for permission, but she was suddenly blinded by a bright light that she had seen before. The wizard used his magic again and quickly disappeared, leaving the master and his daughter alone. She hoped she didn't sound too rude. After Cayenne left, Tria turned to Eliza and said hello. The protagonist noticed that the girl was afraid of an unfamiliar ant talking to her. The craftswoman stretched out her hand to Eliza and introduced herself, saying her name and that Tria was the owner of the children's toy workshop. After that, the heroine invited the girl to talk inside. Eliza's pale cheeks were covered with a pink blush when an unfamiliar ant took her hand, but Eliza agreed anyway. Tria thought that the girl was very small. How old was she? However, it is unlikely that Eliza is still at the age to suck on a pacifier. The master asked how old the girl was and whether she liked cookies with milk. Eliza replied that she was indeed 4 years old and that she loved cookies. The master became irritated when she remembered Cayenne's words, who said that the girl was between 1 and 3 years old and that the man seemed to know nothing at all. When the two entered the studio, Tria invited the girl to sit on the couch and wait for a minute. After a while, the baker returned with a plate of delicious cookies and a glass of milk. The protagonist said that she wanted to show little Eliza something, but she seemed a little shy and surprised by what Aunt Tria said. The craftswoman was not sure that the girl would like what she had created, but she had to show Eliza the toys anyway. Tria placed a pillow in front of Eliza, on which lay a pacifier and rattles made of plate, which were decorated with precious stones. The craftswoman noticed Eliza's strange expression and thought that you wouldn't know she liked toys from her face. Tria was nervous and said that these were probably too childish for a 4-year-old to use. Instead, Eliza pointed at the toys in front of her and quickly changed her face and was about to say something. Eliza's eyes shone and sparkled when the girl asked if these toys with precious stones were expensive. The protagonist was surprised by this question and stared at Eliza with her mouth open for a few seconds. However, the craftswoman still said that these were indeed expensive toys because precious stones were used to create them. Eliza quickly, without even thinking, replied that she liked the toys because if she sold them, she could get money for them. Tria certainly did not expect that all this would lead to money. The craftswoman tried to reassure the girl by showing her such beautiful stones on the rattles, and Eliza instead dreamed of saving up money and running away from home. The main character was frozen in place by Eliza's words and could not find the words to say. Tria was genuinely surprised to hear that Eliza was thinking of running away from home because she was being subjected to domestic violence. The protagonist started talking and tried to draw the girl's attention to herself, not to her dreams of money, and Eliza quickly turned her gaze to Tria. Tria asked if it was possible that Eliza's father was abusing her. Maybe he beats his daughter or yells at the girl. The master saw the girl's reaction and thought that she was frightened by Eliza's simple words, which was not good at all. The protagonist said that she was completely on the girl's side and that Eliza could safely tell her. The girl didn't believe it and asked if the auntie was really on her side. Tria knew from the girl's reaction that there was definitely a problem. The girl seemed to be afraid to tell the truth and stuttered. The master waited patiently for the girl's answer, worried about what she might hear. Little Eliza reached out with her hands to the master, as if she was afraid to tell the truth out loud. An excited child whispered in the protagonist's ear that her father would soon get rid of her. The master tensed up even more and was surprised by this answer. After all, Cayenne called his daughter's name so tenderly. How could this be? Tria wondered how serious it was if Eliza was telling a stranger about it. The heroine decided that only she could help this child. Tria clenched her fists and thought that she should report this horrible father. She asked the girl if her father had beaten her somewhere. Could she show the master? However, Eliza said that this did not happen, and Tria was relieved to learn that there was no physical violence. The protagonist asked if maybe Cayenne feeds her daughter only a couple of times a day, or maybe she doesn't give her food at all. The girl said that her father feeds her 3 times a day, gives her milk and even chocolates and cookies. Tria learned that the girl was not being starved, and that was a good thing. The girl was only curious because Eliza is very small. The master asked the child to tell her in more detail about how her father insults her. The heroine could see that Eliza was worried because, of course, it is very difficult to tell about this, especially to a stranger. The little girl said she would tell, but that no one else could know, and Tria agreed and listened attentively. Eliza said that she was fake without explaining exactly what that meant, adding that when her father found out, he would get rid of her. The girl was clinging to the hand of her aunt and looked very sad, saying that she had to save up money. The main character did not quite understand what the little child was talking about and froze in place, trying to comprehend what she had just heard. Tria was relieved when she realized that it was not violence, but just a family matter. She asked if there was anything she could do to help. She thought that if she had known this was going to happen, she would have slept a little longer. The protagonist leaned back on the couch and thought, it seems that Eliza has no other guardian. But anyway, Tria believed that Cayenne was unlikely to get rid of the little child because he was not evil, but just a bit of a strange person. Eliza continued to talk. She wanted the lady to help her, but she replied that she only knew how to make toys, so how could she help? However, the girl said that this was exactly what she needed. Tria was surprised and turned her attention to the girl. Little Eliza just smiled sweetly and innocently at Aunt Tria, as if she were an angel. Eliza took the rattles in her hands and showed them to the craftswoman. She said she liked all these beautiful things and asked me to make more of them. The master rolled her eyes and looked at the little girl in surprise. Tria didn't even know what to say. She thought that gemstone processing was not her specialty, and little Eliza looked at the master with puppy eyes. When the little girl started to cry, Tria apologized and said that the order was only for 2 toys, and if Eliza didn't have money, it would be difficult to do anything. Suddenly, Cayenne appeared and asked in a cold voice if his daughter was crying now. When both girls saw a man who suddenly appeared in front of them and frightened them so much that Eliza even started screaming, Cayenne looked at Tria again with a scary look and mockingly asked why the master allowed their Eliza to cry. The little girl shuddered with fear, and the master thought, did Cayenne just deliberately emphasize the word there? Eliza turned her head to her auntie and asked, she's on her side, right? The master agreed, because she is always on the side of children, and the girl looked at her with pleading eyes. However, the main character was very nervous herself and did not know what to do. She was sure that Cayenne was going to ask what was going on. Everything is very confusing. The man was looking at his daughter, who was crying and afraid for some reason, and the nail technician was very nervous. The wizard called his daughter's name, and she flinched when she heard her name. Cayenne approached the little girl and leaned over to her, then wiped a tear that was running down Eliza's cheek with his finger. The girl's father asked if she liked the toy, and Tria realized that the girl was just squeezing out tears. Cayenne said that Eliza looks scarier when she cries, so she should stop. He also asked if it was Tria who made his daughter cry. The craftswoman thought that it was the first time she had seen such a beautiful child since birth, and she also said that it was not because of her that Eliza was crying. When Cayenne saw the toy in his little daughter's hands and appreciated the craftswoman's work, he had to admit that Tria had good skills. Looking at the toy, one could see that it had no impurities or dangerous sharp corners. I think this is the first time Eliza has ever said she likes something. Cayenne looked up at the craftswoman and said that he wanted to order a few more baby things for Eliza to play with. However, despite such a good offer, Tria, unfortunately, cannot accept a personal order. The master thought that Cayenne seemed to have a lot of power and money, so if she failed, who knows, this man could harm her. When he heard the refusal, Cayenne got angry and looked at the artist again with an angry look and asked her if she could not make another order. A tense atmosphere began to hover around, and the main character became nervous when she saw such a negative reaction from Cayenne. The heroine panicked. She was scared. Was this wizard really going to hurt her? The girl wanted to call Shady, but suddenly Cayenne held out his hand with important papers. Cayenne gave the girl money for her work, but in the amount of a couple of times more than necessary. The nail technician took the money, and the man said that this amount included 10 million as he had promised, and the other 20 million was in advance. The protagonist was holding such a huge amount of money, and now she is thinking about Cayenne's offer. Now the man was looking at the master with a smile, thinking that now she would not be able to refuse him. Looking at the smug Cayenne, Tria felt as if she had already been in this situation. However, it is very difficult to work without sleep. Tria wanted to apologize and give up the job, but the wizard offered her that if his daughter liked the toys, he would add another 20 million. When Tria heard the sum of 40 million, she offered to give her 3 weeks instead of 1, but she still hoped that the man would refuse the deal. But unexpectedly for the artist, Cayenne agreed to the proposal and said that they would meet in 3 weeks. Also, Tria needed to be told what kind of toy she needed to create this time. Cayenne reached for his daughter, about to pick her up, and said that he didn't know what kind of toy the craftswoman wanted her to create, but it would be nice to have a place for his daughter to go and play. The main character was surprised to hear that she needed to create a place. Cayenne said that he had only the same materials, precious stones. So having poured the jewelry on the table in front of Tria, Cayenne and his daughter were about to leave to say goodbye to the master. Even when her husband and daughter had already left, Tria still sat there looking at the gems with wonder in her eyes, not knowing how to react. A pile of gems lay on the table, shining with bright colors, and the craftswoman was in complete shock, trying to realize what had just happened. The girl didn't even think about it, and without hesitation called Shady and told him that they had to go to the Forbidden Forest immediately. At that time, Cayenne and her daughter were already in another luxurious house. It was already dark outside and the stars appeared in the sky. The girl was holding her new toys, her rattles, and playing with them, the precious stones shining brightly on the toy. Small, shiny pebbles shimmered inside the rattle, making sounds. Eliza thought that she had no idea that there were so many sounds in toys. Was this what the craftswoman was trying to tell her? The girl was very sorry to sell her toy, even though she thought it would be an investment in her future, because her real mother had never bought Eliza such toys. In her past life, the girl was abandoned by her parents and died before she reached the age of 10. And when Eliza was reborn, she was unable to meet her parents because they sold her to the owner of the tower, just because they both had the same eye color. When Eliza met her future father for the first time, she was nervous, but she called him father. Cayenne, on the other hand, looked at little Eliza and showed no interest or warmth toward her. Even though Eliza is still a child, she still knows that it is very difficult to meet good parents a second time. Eliza doesn't know when she will be taken away again. At any time, they can unleash their anger at someone for being deceived. As she played with the rattles, the girl wondered why the sounds inside them were so sad, but the toy was still very beautiful. In her past life, the girl learned something from the TV screen, and in her new life, she learned from her mother. It's money, and if she has money, she can go anywhere. Eliza had heard that what shines brings money, and there are many shining stones inside the rattle. The little girl held up her hand, holding one of the rattles, and decided that she had to sacrifice her toys. Eliza was playing with other children and showing them her new toy, telling them about it, while everyone else was fascinated by the shiny rattles. Behind the children stood Cayenne and two other men who were watching the children. One of the men with blonde, almost white hair said that it turned out that the tower owner's daughter had brought an amazing toy. This man was the ruler of the Obelisk Empire. He had light hair like snow and bright green eyes, and he was dressed in luxurious clothes. Cayenne told the ruler that he decided to buy toys for his daughter because he thought Eliza was bored. Suddenly, the man called his daughter, and when she heard this, she abruptly stopped playing with the other children and fell silent. Eliza quickly ran to her father and hid under his robe, clinging to Cayenne. Another man, who was a great craftsman, said that it seemed that Cayenne and Eliza had become much closer. And Cayenne, in turn, replied rather coldly that his relationship with his daughter was much better than the master's relationship with his real daughter. Cayenne noticed that the master had come here with his other child, which means that his real daughter is now locked up at home. And the wizard noticed that the magician looked happy. Cayenne replied that things had gotten much better than before, when the master had mocked the wizard. Cayenne patted his daughter's head, and she thought that if she put up with it, they would buy her even more toys later. She was happy to have the master on her side as well. While the atmosphere was tense, Eliza was playing with her toy and noticed that the sound of the rattle reminded her of her auntie's voice. The ruler of the empire broke into the dialogue and said that it seemed that both men had ignored his words. He also added that Eliza's new toy was a personal order that he liked. The ruler asked Cayenne if he could share with everyone present, including other aristocrats who were in the room, the name and address of the workshop where he ordered the toys. Cayenne patted his daughter's head again and replied that he didn't want the craftsman he had ordered to be busy with other orders. Upon hearing the answer, the ruler of the empire smiled ominously but said nothing, his smile looking rather threatening. Cayenne thought that he should be careful because this cunning emperor loves to take what belongs to others. The wizard said that if they had nothing else to talk about, he had to leave, because Cayenne was busy preparing for her daughter's awakening ceremony. Eliza turned her attention to Cayenne and was surprised by the new information. What kind of awakening ceremony was this? Cayenne had a ceremony before he turned 3. The wizard replied that it was a good way to awaken abilities faster. Eliza, listening to the adults talk, wondered what kind of awakening ceremony they were talking about, and if she made a mistake, Cayenne would catch her before she could save up the money. Cayenne also added that through this ceremony, Ain will officially introduce his daughter. When Eliza heard this, she wondered if she could become the real daughter of the tower owner. The man said that his daughter was tired, so they would go back home, and the master and the ruler of the empire looked at them. The ruler smiled slyly and could not believe that Cayenne had just run away. A man in a luxurious robe called over a master who had long light brown hair and light clothes and wore glasses. The master looked back at the ruler. The ruler smiled even wider, showing his unnaturally sharp teeth. He offered a deal. If the master found the address of the same workshop, the ruler would share something with him. The master looked at the ruler for a few seconds, as if contemplating what his own response would be. Suddenly he laughed softly, putting his hand to his chin, seemingly not quite believing the ruler's words. The master replied that he would rather believe that the sky was not blue, but actually red, than that the ruler's soul was not so black. The governor, on the other hand, replied that it was a joke. A man with long hair called out to his daughter Lily, and she quickly ran up to him. The little girl hugged her father tightly, smiling sweetly. The master recalled the words of Cain, who said that his relationship with Eliza was much better than the master's relationship with his own daughter. The man thought it would be nice if his real daughter was as gentle and affectionate as Lily. Sarah was the master's real daughter, who appeared to him after he took custody of Lily. From the very beginning, the master was unable to get close to his own daughter because of her wariness, and now Sarah ignores him altogether. However, when he tried to find out why Sarah was unhappy, the answer took the master by surprise. The girl replied that the great master probably hated her. Then she will not catch his eye and will live out her days quietly. The man could not believe that these were the words of his 7-year-old daughter. However, even so, he cannot get rid of the feeling of responsibility as a father for his daughter. The master thought it would be better if Sarah said what she wanted. The girl was emotionless and did not look like a child. Lil looked at her father with her blue eyes and said that she also wanted rattles like Eliza's. The master would really like Sarah to be as cute as Lily. The man said that he and his daughter would go to the workshop and order a toy. After that, the workshop was not as quiet as it had been before. Tria has an unexpected guest. At some point, little Eliza started coming to the studio very often. Tria believed that her relationship with the girl was much better now than when she first met her, but Eliza was getting a little bored with the master. Eliza asked if the craftswoman was working. Did she use a lot of glitter? Tria replied that she tries to use as many gems as possible. The main character is already used to talking about money. After all, the world does not stand still. Tria is too old to believe that children come to the studio for dreams and hope. The craftswoman showed Eliza the layout drawn on paper and asked if the girl wanted the craftswoman to add glitter in another place to show her. Eliza quickly and energetically showed us exactly where she wanted to see more gems. After looking at the model, the craftswoman thought that it would be much easier to arrange the jewelry outside, but from the very beginning, this was not her line of work. She just made wooden bears and things like that. Perhaps the nail technician should have asked the client for a month's work, not 3 weeks. Trisha looked at the model of the toy she was to create. After thinking about it for a while, Tria sighed heavily and thought it was her fault for being so dependent on money. Eliza called Tria the master of Tria, and the girl said that she might not have to run away. The protagonist was happy to hear the news and congratulated Eliza, thinking that she had talked to her father and resolved the misunderstanding. Eliza told me joyfully and energetically that Cayenne had decided to organize awakening ceremonies. So, if the girl proves herself well there, he will make her his real daughter. Trisha asked what one should do at this ceremony. However, Eliza did not know it herself, but the ceremony would take place the next day, so she would tell the master later. Trisha thought that Eliza and Cayenne hadn't talked and hadn't decided anything. The heroine had a bad feeling. The little girl was a little nervous and thought about her words and what to say next. Eliza continued, "She doesn't really like her father. After all, if it is not useful, if it remains fake, then Cayenne will definitely harm the girl." The girl believed that her father also wanted to have a daughter of his own, not a fake like Eliza. When she heard this, the master thought about it and thought that it looked different from her side. Perhaps deep down, Cayenne is calling his daughter stupid, recalling his reaction when Tria called the girl their Eliza. Tria believed that if the wizard was not interested in his daughter, he would not do anything for her. The protagonist recalls that an artist she knew, an old man from the neighboring house, had a hard time because of aristocrats. They demanded that their grandfather paint a portrait of their nieces in a day. For some reason, Tria feels like she's in a similar situation. Tria thought that there are many kinds of love in the world, so Eliza will have difficulties in the future. However, this life that Eliza has is much better than the life of a shepherd who cannot receive any love. The artist's father, who had already died, used to say that his daughter should take over the studio. Tria hoped that Kayan and Eliza would make up, and after the conversation, the master told the girl to be quiet, because Tria would be working and Eliza could still look around. Suddenly, Tria heard strange, very sweet sounds, as if someone was being crushed. The artist looked in the direction of the sounds to see where they were coming from. Small, tiny legs that looked more like paws moved across the master's table. It was Shady in the body of a doll, who seemed to miss his mistress very much. However, Tria told him not to show up when there were other people in the studio. Shady hadn't noticed that there was a little girl in the workshop, and now she was staring at the live doll in complete shock. The master was also in a state of panic and did not know what Eliza's reaction to what she saw would be. A few seconds later, the girl was about to say something, but she couldn't find the right words. Very quickly, the girl's emotions changed, and she looked with interest at the living doll, which she called a scarecrow. Tria was surprised when Eliza called Shady a scarecrow, and he felt as if his heart had been broken. Eliza asked if this little guy was Tria's friend, and she agreed with her question. The artist smiled sweetly and said that Shady was her partner. They ran the workshop together. He was like a spirit protecting this place, although this was not entirely true. Little Eliza was even more surprised when she heard this fiction and stood there not knowing what to say. Tria thought that the girl might guess the lie because she couldn't let Shady be recognized. Eliza did believe her and now considered Shady to be a protector, which seemed very cool to her. Tria and Shady stood in a cool pose and showed themselves to be cool heroes. Tria was delighted that the little girl believed the story and told her to keep it a secret. The girl agreed and asked to hug Shady. The girl asked Shady to play with her while the master was working. Tria thought that this was Shady's way of saying that she was only going to be working for a while. Quite a bit of time had passed. The sun had gone below the horizon again, and stars were visible in the sky. Tria was still busy working on the drawing, and she thought the children were playing better than she expected, because the workshop was too quiet. The girl decided to check on her guest and her friend and went into the room where they were playing. Little Eliza sat on the floor and played with Shady, feeding him a pile of cookies, and he obediently ate them and got enough to eat. The protagonist decided to save her friend and took him away from Eliza, telling her that it was almost night. Shouldn't the girl go home? After all, tomorrow is the awakening ceremony, and Shady is conditionally already falling asleep. Shady seemed to be getting sick from all the cookies he had eaten, and Tria wondered why he held back and didn't stop it, since he wasn't that patient. Eliza knew she should be going home, but she really wanted to play with her new friend. The protagonist was worried about the little girl, because tomorrow is the day when Eliza can become Kayan's real daughter. Of course, the girl is very worried. Eliza was already holding a piece of paper with the magic spell of transportation that her father had given her. Before Eliza left, Tria said that if there was any good news, she would be happy to hear it. The craftswoman promised that she would prepare a gift for the girl and wait for news. Eliza looked at the Wattle and Daub master with sincere surprise. She did not expect to hear this from her. When the girl heard these words, she was happy and smiled, and she was no longer so sad and scared. Eliza promised to tell the master about the news later, waved her pen, and said goodbye to Tria. The protagonist breathed a sigh of relief when the child returned home and the workshop became calm again. Tria was still wondering why Shady ate so many cookies. Usually when he is annoyed, he doesn't leave them behind. However, the protagonist did not receive an answer. Shady sat on her shoulder and remained silent. The girl thought that Shady had fallen asleep on her shoulder and called out to him again, and a black shadow appeared behind her shoulder. Shady transformed into his human-like form behind the main character. Shady played with this child because the master took care of the girl. Did Shady suffer so much for nothing? He tried very hard to please this little girl. Tria was, of course, pleasantly surprised by her friend's act, but there was no need for it. Tria said that Shady was acting like a child. She told him to go to the forest and bring back one thick log. But Shady replied that he had eaten too much, to which the master did not believe and said that he had to hurry to prepare the gift. However, the little guest did not come to the studio the next day or the day after or the week after. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the tower was quite quiet but a bit tense. The wizard was sitting at his desk in his office doing some important work, and on the desk were some documents. Kayen thought that what he was doing now would take some time. The wizard's assistant told him that it was time for the meeting and that he should go to the workshop. He expected it to happen today, but it was too late. However, after thinking about it for a while, I decided that it would be a good idea to take the toy and wait. Kayen said he would go first, and magical shining rays appeared in the room, formed by a magic spell. In a moment, the tower master and his assistant were elsewhere with the help of their magic. The wizard noticed that every time he came to the workshop, he always smelled wood or metal, and his assistant was interested in what Miss Tria's workshop actually looked like. Kayen noticed that the workshop door was open and told his assistant to wait outside. The wizard walked into the middle of a small courtyard, which was located in front of the workshop. Seeing that no one is there and no one is trying to meet the guests, Kayen cannot believe that the workshop is closed. Suddenly, the man came across something strange on the ground, which was someone's hand. Kayen noticed the master lying unconscious on the ground for some reason and wondered why she was there. The man wondered why his daughter liked this girl so much, since there was nothing special about Tria. Besides, the main character's name was so precious. Kayen leaned over to the girl and asked if she was dead. The man called Tria to wake up. The wizard noticed that the girl's breathing was ragged and her face and hands were swollen. Kayen touched the unconscious girl's face with his hand and wanted to do something, but suddenly heard footsteps. The tower owner's servant burst in and said he wanted to come in too. The assistant noticed a rather scary picture of the tower owner crouching over the unconscious body of the girl. The assistant shouted that the owner could not become a murderer. Kayen turned to his assistant and told him to shut up, because he hadn't done it. The man added that the girl was already lying on the floor and suddenly stopped talking when he realized something. Kayen wondered what he was doing. He touches this worthless girl who was covered in soot. The assistant felt the magic in the room, and Kayen made excuses that he had only used a little regeneration magic when he was afraid that this worthless girl would die before Kayen could pick up his order. Kayen suddenly shouted that his assistant could not understand this because he was only focused on toys, which offended the servant. The two men started arguing and could probably go on for a whole day until they finally stopped. The wizard's assistant sighed heavily as his face turned red because of the quarrel. The owner of the tower was in a bad mood, and Mrs. Tria could not come to her senses. The wizard's assistant came to the workshop for the first time and immediately encountered an unpleasant situation. The assistant was very scared because the owner of the tower kept looking at him with a scary look and kept silent. Suddenly, I heard the tired and hoarse voice of the master who seemed to have just woken up. The protagonist got up from the floor and felt a pain in her neck and cold. She did not realize where she was. The girl recalled that before falling asleep, she finished her work and dropped the hammer she was working with, and then went to bed. It seems that the heroine fell asleep as if she had gone mad. Tria thought about what she would do if someone came into the studio, but quickly fell silent. The girl noticed an unknown man next to her and squealed, and he, in turn, greeted Tria's mistress with a twinkle in his eye. Turning her head in the other direction, she noticed the owner of the tower and was even more surprised. Kayen looked at the craftswoman and asked if she had a hobby of sleeping on the floor. The master thought that she was so tired because of Kayen, but she replied that she had forgotten about the day the paper was due and said that everything would be ready now. The craftswoman said that she had finished the work on the place where the little girl could play yesterday. The girl asked why Eliza did not come with her father. However, Kayen replied that the craftswoman should first show the finished toy. Tria agreed, but she was still worried that something might have happened. The craftswoman approached something large, covered with a cloth, and said that she didn't have to go far to show the finished work. She was afraid that dust might get on the small house for playing, so she covered it with a cloth. When the fabric fell off the new toy, Kayen and his assistant looked at the craftswoman's work with interest. The main character presented her first large-scale work, which turned out very well. The girl added that it would be nice if Eliza was the first to see it. The wizard's assistant, who was very impressed with Miss Tria's work, said that Eliza would have been very happy, and it was a pity that she did not see it. The girl asked the new guest, whom she had never seen before, who he was. The man replied that he was an aide to the owner of the tower, and his name was Fabre. The girl tilted her head slightly to the side and asked about the owner of the tower. Fabre looked first at Kayen and then again at Tria. Did she not know the owner of the tower? The girl tried to pretend that she didn't know and stay calm. Cayenne didn't seem too happy about the news, but he stopped talking in vain because he wanted to ask him something. The magician pointed to the dollhouse and asked if it was made of marble. The protagonist brushed it off and said that it was wood that looked like marble. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary tree, but inside it is white, like marble, and the pattern on it is age rings. Of course, marble would be better, but it does not have absorbing properties. That's why the wood that Tria chose could be combined with other materials and is safe for the child. However, it is difficult to work with such material. If it wasn't for Shetty, the girl would have had a hard time processing wood. Tria said that she made this house because the main theme was storage. Kayan looked at the girl in surprise and did not understand why the main topic was storage. She went on to explain that children also need time to be alone, so this was the essence of her work. She believed that Eliza, especially, needed a space to hide from her father, whom she was afraid of. If you look inside the house, you can see the night sky, and it has windows and doors. If the child wants to, he or she can close up inside the house. And, just as Eliza wanted, the craftswoman made the stars in the middle of the house out of white gemstones. Tria thought that the girl would definitely like the house, and it would be nice if Eliza changed her mind about selling it. And now, after the men saw the toy, Tria wanted to know where Eliza was. Cayenne replied that the girl is now in the process of an awakening ceremony. However, the main character did not quite understand the answer. Didn't this ceremony take place a week ago? Cayenne continued to explain that sometimes it happens that the ceremony is completed quickly, in a few days. But according to the records, the longest ceremony lasted 4 years. The main character was frozen with shock and could not find the words to describe this situation. The girl clenched her fists and asked what really happens at this awakening ceremony. Tria knew that Eliza was going to return immediately after the ceremony, literally the next day. The girl did not know exactly how long this event would last. The wizard said that in simple terms, it was a ceremony where Eliza learned magic. So, if the girl is Cayenne's daughter, she simply cannot help but go through it. The main character kept asking questions. She was curious about what exactly was happening at the event. The protagonist's attention was drawn to Fabre, and the girl turned her head to him. The man explained that it was an exam in which the girl had to find a way out of a maze created by ancient magic. So if Eliza really has mana, she will definitely get out of there. When Tria heard about the ancient spell, she was even more surprised and did not know how to react to the situation. At that moment, the master remembered Eliza's words. When the girl said that if she was not useful, she would be a fake, Cayenne will harm the girl. Tria could barely say anything and asked, "Isn't little Eliza 4 years old?" Tria asked anxiously, "This labyrinth Fabre was talking about, does it guarantee safety for whoever enters it?" Fabre assured the girl not to worry so much, because if she had nightmares and terrible danger there, it was a place where everyone goes at the age of 3 or 4 if they have mana. The wizard's assistant also passed this exam at the age of 4. If Eliza awakens her powers, she will immediately find a way out of the maze. However, the main character was still very concerned about this and decided to ask some questions. The girl asked, what if little Eliza had no mana? What will happen to her then? Will she be able to get out of the maze? The wizard's assistant was surprised by this question and froze in place. Fabre thought about what he should say, and he also started to get a little nervous. Fabre replied that a labyrinth is a place where everything is created from mana. So if someone has absolutely no magic, something bad will happen. The girl was silent and did not know what to say. She was standing in one place, her eyes staring at nothing. Eliza's words keep ringing in the protagonist's head. She recalled how the little girl was excited that she might not have to run away from home, because if she did well at the awakening ceremony, she would be recognized as a real daughter. Tria knew that this was not ordinary sympathy, just a reminder of her past. It's not that the father hated the child, it's just that the child is afraid of being abandoned. Honestly, she didn't want to run away. She just wanted to know that she could get love. Tria missed the mistake, but can she intervene in this case? The girl knows nothing about magic. What if, when the main character intervenes, she makes things even worse than they were? Or what if nothing can be done? Meanwhile, Cayenne started talking about the toy again, and he looked at it again, making sure that everything was okay. The main character decided that she had to do something, so she called the owner of the tower. Cayenne looked back at the craftswoman and asked what she wanted. He also said that the work was very good. Eliza would definitely like it. Tria knew that this person knew that Eliza was real. The girl thought he was an ordinary aristocrat. But as soon as she found out that Cayenne was the owner of the tower, she remembered all the gossip that was going around. Tria has heard people say that the owner of the tower enjoys sending people he doesn't like to places like hell. Even so, Tria doesn't think it's right to bring this gossip into the mix. Cayenne said that he also liked this toy created by the craftswoman. The owner of the tower handed the girl the promised 20 million, and the rest of the money was for a new toy for the child. He gave her 50 million. Tria realized that no matter how expensive a toy is, it is useless if no child uses it. Cayenne tilted his head slightly and wondered why the artist was not accepting payment. Toys without owners are the saddest thing in the world, Tria knew that. The reason why the main character is still doing this business is that she wants children to use her toys with a smile on their faces. The main character did not want other children to be like her, sad and abandoned. Tria asked, what if Eliza didn't get out of the maze? It's safe to say that this surprised Cayenne. He changed his face very quickly. The man got angry and asked Tria what she meant. The protagonist was scared, but she clenched her fists and assured herself not to be afraid. She asked what if Eliza didn't have any mana. Cayenne got even angrier and asked again what the master was talking about. The tower owner approached the protagonist and asked how his child could not have mana. Tria agreed that, of course, Cayenne and Eliza are very similar. After all, purple eyes are rare, so she thinks they both share the same blood. But there was something else. Tria dared to ask, Eliza is not really Cayenne's own daughter, is she? The man looked at the master in surprise and immediately fell silent, not knowing what to say. Cayenne turned his head away guiltily, but it seems that it was true that Eliza was not his own daughter. Trisha wanted to ask the reason why Eliza is so afraid of her father, but Cayenne interrupted her by asking what made Trisha think that Eliza was not his own. The protagonist admitted that she learned all this information personally from Eliza. The girl told the Tria master that she actually had other parents and that Cayenne did not consider the child his own daughter. Eliza's mother lied to the tower owner, so the girl is afraid. Cayenne did not think the child knew the truth. He thought that with the passage of time, the girl had forgotten everything. The man knew it himself. From the very beginning, he did not have a daughter. He recalled the past when he first met Eliza. A very thin woman assured the man that the little girl was his daughter because the child had bright purple eyes, just like his. And didn't they both look very much alike? Of course, Cayenne did not believe it because it was his first time in a place like this. The man saw the girl and noticed that she was so pale with fear that she couldn't even breathe. Cayenne realized that if he did not take this girl and save her, her own parents would harm her. The street where the owner of the tower was now located had always been home to homeless and poor people, a place where children died, whose name no one even knew. If this fact is not changed, caring for these children can only become a suffocating poison. The owner of the tower thought it was pointless, so he decided to leave. Suddenly, a girl behind him called him father, her voice trembling and sounding broken. The girl, with pale skin, dressed in some kind of cloth, with long pink hair and sparkling purple eyes, approached Cayenne. Cayenne looked back and saw a small, exhausted and thin girl, but with life in her eyes. When he saw this child, the man decided quickly, and without hesitation, he already knew what he had to do. He decided that their eye color was similar after all. In the end, Cayenne took the girl because her eyes looked like his own, and also because she reminded Cayenne of his little one. The wizard replied that he was sure that Eliza was not his own daughter. When we came back to reality, Tria looked at her husband in confusion. Did he already know the truth? Cayenne asked sarcastically if he looked like a married man. On the contrary, Tria agreed. The master thought, isn't that much stranger? If Eliza is not Cayenne's daughter, is it not more likely that she has no magic? She asked why Cayenne was so sure that the child had mana if she was not related to the man. However, Cayenne replied something very strange. He mocked again. How could his daughter not have mana? Tria was surprised that Cayenne did not deny that Eliza was not his family, but claimed that she had mana, because you can't create genes that don't exist, right? Cayenne, on the other hand, looked at the girl in front of him, and she thought, is she the one who is saying unreasonable things here? Cayenne didn't want to put up with it, so he held out his hand and told the protagonist to marry him. Tria wondered why, but nevertheless extended her hand to the tower owner, not even knowing what was in store for her. Suddenly, the girl and Cayenne were enveloped by shining rays with a blue glow that slightly blinded their eyes. The main character was frightened when she saw such miracles and asked what they were. This is the first time she has ever encountered such magic. At first, the wizard was surprised, but then he smiled and laughed at the master's reaction.